The river is breaking apart like glass under a slow hammer. Sheets of ice buckle, tilt, and vanish, the current swallowing them whole with a hiss that sounds too much like breath. Emma Holt's boots skid on a rim of slush. The bank gives way. Cold takes her in one brutal gulp. The shock is total. Water like knives, light shredded to ribbons. She fights for the surface, finds it, gulps air that burns worse than the river. The camera goes first, a black shape, cartwheeling, then her pack, then the hat she's worn through 3 winters. The current grabs her ribs and drags. Not here, she thinks, not at this bend, the one that once meant safety. A bass thud answers the river. A shadow detaches from the bank, antlerless and enormous, shoulders rising like a moving hill. A moose drops into the water with a sound that silences the bankside birds. It doesn't charge her. It angles its body across the current, makes a wall of muscle and hide. Water shoulders off its flank, and suddenly Emma isn't spinning, she is sliding toward gravel, toward breath. She looks up, dark, steady eyes, a thin, pale scar at the throat. Of all places, of all moments, why this one? Did the river remember? Or did she? Her name is Emma Holt, 38, a wildlife photographer who knows the difference between watching and wanting. Watching is patient, hours in frost, fingers numb around a thermos, waiting for a set of tracks to become a life. Wanting is louder, the itch to step closer, to make a moment yours. Years with Alberta's conservation agency taught her the cost of that itch. So she lives by a rule as spare as winter: take nothing but light, leave nothing but room. A year before the river took her, Emma stood on this same bend with 3 officers from the Provincial Wildlife Unit. They had followed a tangle of hoof marks and panic to a snarl of abandoned netting half-iced into the shore. Inside it, a young cow moose, big as a boulder, trembling like a bird, thrashed and stilled, thrashed and stilled. Emma worked the long lens from a respectful distance, while the team did the careful, unshowy work. A perimeter of space, a rope on a branch, steady voices that stayed low and even. It took 40 minutes to become simple again. Nylon unbitten from skin, the loop eased from a narrow throat. The moose didn't bolt. She stood, steam lifting off her back, ears pivoting, breath measuring the gap between them. Emma saw a bright thread of skin where the net had burned a line, thin as a river reed. The animal's eyes passed over them one by one, and then, without drama, she walked into the trees, absorbed by a world that knows how to keep its distance. Emma filed the images and the memory in the same place inside her. She told no one beyond the report, added one note in the margin: site fidelity likely. Returned next dusk, tracks on same bar. The promise of this story is small and human and enough. Sometimes the place where you make someone safe becomes the place that keeps you too. Winter in northern Alberta is a lesson in editing. The world pares itself down to essentials: spruce, river, wind. Snow writes the same sentence over everything and waits for someone to read it. Emma's cabin sits on a bluff above the bend, 2 rooms, a wood stove, a porch with a chair that remembers the shape of her shoulders. The stove ticks after dark like a small animal breathing. Some nights she forgets to turn on a lamp and lets the fire do the talking. She came here after the avalanche took Ben, her husband, a backcountry guide who could map a valley with his eyes closed and a finger on the wind. Rescue teams found him by the line of a ski and the story of the slope. The mountain kept the rest. Grief didn't arrive like thunder, it seeped like meltwater under a door. Emma learned the rituals that make it bearable: stack wood, boil water, swap a cracked stove gasket, frame what you can hold in the viewfinder, and forgive what you can't. In the morning, she runs fingers along the lens hood to brush away ice crystals, breath blooming into brief ghosts. She checks batteries warmed in her pocket, scribbles weather notes, barometer falling, Chinook hint, fresh browse on willow. She walks the same trail down to the river until her boots know it without her. The bend is a long comma in the current, a place where the river pauses to think. Moose like it because the willows lean close. Emma likes it because the light does too. It would be easy to call the bend a shrine, to attach it to Ben or to that trembling calf cow with the net burn on her throat. But Emma resists neat narratives. In her field notes, she keeps the language plain: tracks crossing sandbar, cow with yearling last week, bald eagle on snag 1640. Still, she can't help noticing how wild things return. Owls to old hollows, beavers to quiet banks, person to a chair that faces a window at dusk. She isn't waiting for a miracle, she's practicing attention. If there's a faith left in her, it's this: the land keeps its own kind of memory, and if you stand still long enough, it lets you borrow some. Spring doesn't arrive here so much as undo winter, one thread at a time. The river loosens its grip in seams, the banks slump, the willows redden like a quiet blush. A warm wind rides in from the Rockies and Emma notes it. Chinook, 10-15 knots, then shoulders her pack and heads for the bend. She isn't chasing anything dramatic. Moose shift their routes with thaw, and she wants the small, ordinary footage: a muzzle raking willow bark, hooves stepping from crusted snow to sand, steam in the blue of morning. Light pools like spilled milk on the ice, and she tests each step with a pole, the way Ben taught her. Weight low, angle wide, listen for the voice of the river underneath. There is a soft, wrong sound, not a crack, more a sigh, a tired hinge opening somewhere underfoot. The world dips half an inch, as if taking a breath. Emma steps back, too late. The skin of the river simply isn't there anymore. Cold clamps her ribs, air punches from her lungs. The camera slams her chest, jerks free, pinwheels once, then vanishes into the dark between ice plates. She fights the old, stupid urge to stand up where there is nothing to stand on. Training kicks in, elbows wide on the edge, boots floating, kick, kick, belly to the shelf. The shelf crumbles, the current takes her shoulder and yanks. Her thoughts narrow to lists. Find the flow, face downstream, keep the airway clear. She tries to shout, only a hoarse syllable. The bank is a slant of willow and sand 15 yards away, then 20, then a number that stops mattering. She catches a bobbing branch and loses it. Her hat skims past, a small, ridiculous boat. The river turns at the bend, and Emma turns with it, dragged toward the throat of the current, where breakup piles its knives. For a bare instant there is sky, open, shocking blue, and then water closes over her head and the world goes mute. Flashback to a year earlier, a sky the color of tin, willow catkins graying along the bank, and a rag of monofilament snarled into shore ice, the kind of abandoned net that turns a river's edge into a snare. The conservation hotline flagged a vague report: distressed moose, possible entanglement, near the bend past the gravel pit. Emma met Officers Garcia and Lavoy at the gate, both practiced in the quiet art of calm. They parked well back and approached downwind. No heroics, just margins of safety, angles, distance. The young cow moose, broad-backed, winter-thin, stood half on ice, half in water, the net cinched under her jaw and across the throat. Chemical immobilization in water was a last resort, drowning risk too high. The plan: stabilize, create space, let the animal free herself if the system could be softened. Garcia snagged a trailing loop with a hooked pole, Lavoy anchored to a spruce with a sling. Emma stayed 30 meters out with a long lens, documenting each step. Tension on nylon, micro-movements of ears, the white plume of steam in cold air. When the loop lifted, friction shifted from skin to line. Lavoy inched the rope, shoulders locked, ice released with small sticky pops. The cow flinched and steadied. Another pop. The line across the throat slackened from wire to nuisance, then slid free. She didn't bolt. She turned deliberately, scanning each human, ears forward, breath slow. Emma saw 2 identifiers, a thin burn line along the throat and, left of the jaw hinge, a tiny teardrop of white hair. The moose walked into the tree line without drama, absorbed by spruce and shadow. Emma logged the details with clinical restraint. ID Submandibular white tuft, teardrop. Superficial scored line, stress recovery, rapid. 2 evenings later, dusk prints stitched the sandbar. Willow brows showed fresh 45-degree cuts. A rub on a sapling held dark guard hairs. Emma set a trail camera low on a deadfall. The clip that followed was plain and perfect. The cow stepping into frame at 17:41, drinking from a breathing seam in the ice, pausing at the exact spot where the net had been. The lens caught both markers, the faint healing line, the white teardrop. "Sight fidelity," Garcia said after they watched twice. "Not sentiment, survival." Animals returned to places that meant food, cover, relief. Lavoie added, "She's checking the same 5 meters like a door." Emma kept the language careful. Return interval 48-72 HRs, crepuscular tendency, pause behavior consistent. Still a small note crept into the margin. Map rehearsed where pressure became relief. Through late winter the ledger thickened, prints after storms, paired browse heights, a hind hoof stamped directly into an old human boot oval. Nothing proved gratitude. Everything suggested memory of a bend that turned danger into breath and a line in the water where a body had felt safe. Cold is not just temperature, it's a clock. Emma's elbows skate off the ice lip. The current folds her sideways. She coughs a thin rope of air and hears a sound that splits the bank's stillness, a heavy, rounded thud like a log dropped from low height. Then a shape enters the water upstream, broad with no antlers, withers high, neck long as a lever. The cow moose doesn't charge. She steps in, oblique to the flow, angling her body across the current the way a ferry boat does, nose slightly into the push, hindquarters set like a brace. Hydraulics do the rest. Water shoulders off the moose's ribcage and flows around her legs, leaving a lighter, slacker seam along the downstream flank. Emma slips into it as if into the lee of a rock. It isn't elegant, it's physics. She coughs again, boots up, and lets the moose's body be the breakwater that her arms can't be. The animal keeps space, 2, 3 body lengths, never closing, never nudging. Ears cut the air, swiveling, nostrils flare, breath plumes. Twice she steps laterally to hold the angle, each time resetting the slack seam so Emma drifts toward the gravel tongue instead of the river's throat. At the ice edge, the shelf sags and fractures. The moose pivots, plants, and the current presses a corridor that Emma can use. She belly slides over gritted ice, then onto wet sand. Her lungs burn raw, her hands shake. On the far bank, the cow lifts her head. The left submandibular white tuft flashes like a pin of light. A thin, healed scald line traces the throat. Emma knows those marks. She also knows what not to do. She does not reach, whistle, or speak the animal into a story it doesn't belong to. She looks down, coughs, and works a hand into a pocket for her phone. She hits the local conservation number with half-frozen fingers and gives coordinates between shivers. Possible human water incident, she adds, because procedure asks for clarity. Cow moose present at close range, no aggression, requesting assistance and visitor management. While she waits, she crawls on hands and knees up the bank, then stands, keeping the trunk of a willow between them. The moose watches, no head toss, no lip curl, no forward rush, just the steady, evaluative look of an animal that spends its life measuring distances. After a minute, she steps out of the water, shakes once, water glittering off guard hair, and moves to the high, dead grass. She lowers her head to feed as if shelving the episode under that happened. Now, willow. 2 trucks crunch down the access path 10 minutes later. Officers Garcia and Lavoie are first out, orange vests over parkas, voices low. They clock Emma's soaked layers, the broken ice, the cow on the far bar. "Any contact?" Garcia asks. "None," Emma answers. "She held a ferry angle. I used the slack water." It sounds clinical because it is. They set cones and establish a perimeter. No spectators today, but procedure is muscle memory. Lavoie keeps eyes on the cow while Garcia checks Emma's vitals. Pulse fast, pupils reactive, temperature dropping, but steady thanks to wet wicking layers and fast extraction. He offers a foil blanket and a dry hat from a sealed kit. She takes both without protest. Across the river, the cow moose lifts her head once at the new movement, then returns to feeding. Her ears flick tack-tack toward each sound. The officers note distance, posture, and the heeled identifiers. "That's our net cow," Garcia says quietly, not triumphal, just factual. Sight fidelity holds. They do not attempt to approach, tag, or test. There is no emergency on her side of the water. Instead, they manage the human side. A volunteer from the fire hall arrives with a portable heater. Another lays traction mats on the bank. Lavoie walks the edge with a probing pole, marking unsafe ice with flagging tape so no one repeats the morning's error. Emma sips warm electrolyte from a dented thermos and catalogues sensations. Pins of heat returning to fingers, lungs thawing from glass to ache, a slow steadiness replacing the bright ring of adrenaline. Over the next half hour, the moose drifts upstream, pausing where the sandbar shelves, then steps into the trees without theatre. The woods take her like a door closing. Garcia debriefs Emma on camera, date, time, conditions, the behavioral sequence. She keeps to the observable, body angle, lateral steps, maintained distance, no contact. He nods. Good. We'll log it as animal present during human self-extrication, aided by hydraulic shelter created by animal body. The phrase is inelegant and exactly right. Before they leave, Lavoie scans the opposite bank with binoculars. "You know," he says, more to the air than to Emma. "She didn't come for you. She came for the river. You happened to be in the seam." Emma nods because sometimes truth is a relief. And still, when she closes her eyes that night, what she sees is not herself rescued, but a map solved, the same 5 meters, the same angle, a living body remembering how to make a dangerous place slightly less so. Late light pours along the bend like warm brass. Emma sits wrapped in a foil blanket on the gravel tongue, hat down to her brows, lungs settling into a rate that doesn't hurt. The river has resumed its ordinary voice, hiss, murmur, a clink where a plate of ice taps another and drifts on. Across the water, spruce stand in ranks, their shadows long and blue. Movement opens the tree line with no drama at all. A cow moose steps out, broad and sure, the slope of her shoulders catching the last amber. She pauses with one forehoof lifted, reading wind and distance. Ears tilt, recalibrate. A plume of breath unspools. The mark under her jaw flashes and is gone. The small white teardrop Emma knows now by feel as much as sight. They keep space between them, a river and more than a river. Emma doesn't lift the camera. She rests her hands on her knees and lets the scene be uncollected. There is no call, no reaching. The cow angles to the water, lowers her muzzle, and draws a quiet ribbon of current into her mouth. When she lifts her head, drops string from her chin and fall like brief glass. For a long half-minute, they look. No contest, no claim, just the mutual measuring creatures do to stay alive. The moose's ears soften forward, her jaw works willow. A fly lands and is whisked off with a skin shiver. Emma notes the posture, head neutral, weight even, no piloerection, no threat, like she's filling a form only her body can read. A crow passes overhead and writes a single scratch across the quiet. Somewhere upstream, a shard of ice flips and clacks. The cow turns her head, not away but along the line of river, as if confirming what it always promises. Movement, memory, the next mouthful of willow. She takes 2 steps, 3, and the bank reabsorbs her. First shoulders, then hips, then the invisible thread of her passage, stitched shut by spruce. Emma exhales. She doesn't say thank you. She pulls the blanket closer and lets the silence finish the sentence. Good stories travel faster than ice melt. By sunset, the fire hall group chat has already become 3 posts, then 10. Someone mentions a moose rescue, someone else adds woman saved, and by morning, the story has grown legs longer than a cow's. Emma wakes to a buzzing phone, an outdoor blog asking for comment, a local station requesting footage, a stranger promising ethical partnership in exchange for location details. She turns the phone face down and listens to the stove tick. She knows the math. One viral headline equals a dozen cars at the access gate, equals boot prints where there should be none, equals an animal recalculating the map that keeps her alive. Moose aren't built for pursuit. Stress can tip them toward exhaustion, injury, or dangerous defensive choices. Emma can feel the shape of a bruise forming where a story will land, on the animal, not on her. By afternoon, the first pair of long lenses appears on the bluff trail. Two men in new camo with coffee lids and quick talk. "Heard there's a tame cow that swims to people," one says, meaning it as a joke, meaning it not at all. Emma keeps her voice even. "There's a cow moose that uses this river mouth. Please give her room." They nod the way people nod when the nod is the thing they came to do, then shoulder past. The next day brings more, a drone in a backpack, a live stream ring light, a couple whose husky strains at a leash while they argue about getting closer before the light's gone. Emma tries again, distance, willow brows, crepuscular movement, and earns a shrug. The river holds its line, people don't. Near dusk, voices rise from the sandbar. There! And then the unmistakable thud of boots breaking crust. Emma lifts binoculars and finds the cow, broad back, winter coat roughened, stepping out to feed where the current keeps a narrow window of water. The men with the drone throw it into the air. Its rotors whine like an oversized horsefly. The moose startles, and that would be survivable. One startle, one recalculation, but the drone drops, veers, corrects, and the operators chase their own error closer, shouting at a screen instead of the ground. Emma's mouth goes dry. She measures distances, the cow, the men, the soft edge of a marshy side channel where the river fingers into peat. In breakup season, that channel isn't water so much as a mouth, sucking cold, patient. The cow wheels, slips, and in 3 long bounds leaves the gravel for the reed bed. Her hind foot punches through a veneer of ice. She pulls free. Another step, deeper. The men stop finally at the marsh's lip, the drone hovering idiot-sure overhead. Emma has a choice to make and not much time to make it. Keep quiet, keep the footage, keep the secret she's nursed, that there was a seam of slack water made by a living body, and hope the cow saves herself. Or call it in and turn that seam into paperwork, cones, flagging tape, officers, and the end of any private miracle. Her thumb is already on the conservation number before the thought finishes. "Holt," she says when Garcia answers. "Side channel east of the bend. Cow moose in marsh, foot breakthrough, high stressors on site, drone, pedestrians. We need visitor control, possible extraction risk." "On our way," Garcia says. "Keep people back. No heroics." No heroics is a language Emma speaks. She pockets her phone and walks straight at the Gawkers with the simple authority of someone who knows which tone works. "Back from the reeds now," she says, firm as winter. "Flagged ice. You're in violation of wildlife disturbance regulations." She doesn't raise her voice. She raises the spectre of a fine. It works. The drone stutters and lands. The dog walkers step away. Space, the first tool, returns. Blue lights bounce off snow 15 minutes later. Officers spill procedures like rope, establish a perimeter, eyes on the animal, read posture. Lavoie scans with binoculars. The cow's chest heaves, her head bobs with effort. Each lift is a choice, spent. "No darting," Garcia says. "Water risk, we'll try the quiet way." The quiet way looks like patients wearing a uniform. They clear the bank of humans. They wait for the cow to stop panic stepping and start thinking. They lay a line of traction mats on the safest hummocks, not to approach her, but to create a path back if she chooses it. Emma stands well back, logging, respiratory rate elevated, ear position back-forward cycling, footing unstable, drone gone, crowd dispersed. When the cow shifts, it's small, a weight transfer, a test. She finds a firmer patch, another. The marsh lets go like a slow hand unclenching. With 3 lunging, decisive steps, she climbs back onto the sandbar, shaking mud from her legs in a spray that glitters in the last light. She turns once, ears forward, body squared, reading the space now empty of pursuit. Then she moves upstream, not hurried, not slow, and dissolves into spruce. Garcia writes a citation for the drone team. It won't fix everything, but it makes a line. Emma deletes a half-composed email to a network producer. She chooses the smaller story that lives, a perimeter that held, a path left open, an animal allowed to keep her map. In the days after the marsh incident, the river goes back to doing what rivers do, taking its time in public. The bank wears new flagging where Lavoie marked thin ice. The cones come down after a week when night temps steady. The story online cools to a murmur. What stays warm is Emma's attention. She returns to the bluff at dawn and dusk, not to hunt a moment, but to keep a ledger, wind, water level, willow brows, tracks, the long arithmetic of ordinary. The cow returns too, never on command, always as if she had other reasons that simply intersect Emma's view. At first, the signs are second-hand, twin slots of hooves stitched in silt, the neat 45-degree slice of fresh brows, a shoulder rub on a sapling with guard hairs caught like dark commas. Then 3 evenings across a week, the body itself, broad, antlerless, winter coat roughened, the small white teardrop under the jaw. Each time the cow steps into the shallows where breakup left a breathing seam, pauses not long, but recognizably, and feeds. Emma keeps the language plain, return interval trending toward 48-72 HRs, crepuscular bias strong, pause behavior, repeatable, at sandbar meter 41 to 46. She sketches the ferry angle she learned by accident in the water, noting how the moose uses it to cross with less fight, then how that same physics let a human drift into safety without contact. She writes it down the way you'd write down a recipe you didn't know you knew. Not magic, method. Garcia reads her notes at the tailgate of the truck and nods. We're getting a lot of calls, he admits. Drone finds, dogs off leash, people asking if they can see the rescue moose. We won't collar for a headline, he adds, and means it. But Alberta Fish and Wildlife has a study window this spring. If conditions are right, dry ground, low heat, calm animal, team in place, we may fit a short-term drop-off collar to document movement. Data settles arguments that stories can't. 2 weeks later, conditions line up the way fieldwork sometimes agrees to cooperate. No water within darting risk, no spectators, a licensed veterinarian with the immobilization kit, 2 biologists, 2 officers, a recovery sled on standby, and a timer. Emma stands 100 meters back with a permit and a long lens, her role strictly observational. The operation is as quiet as a held breath. The vet assesses wind and range, chooses a low-dose anesthetic appropriate for a large ruminant, and waits for a clear, broadside angle. No yearlings, no obstacles, no water. The dart lands with a soft thwick. The team tracks respiration, temperature, jaw tone, and time, moving in only when the cow's posture confirms safe immobilization. The collar is light, fit with 2 fingers ease, programmed to release on a biodegradable link in 6 months. No more, no less. The vet reverses the drug, the cow's ears flick and find the world again. Within minutes she stands, steady, annoyed in a dignified way, and walks into spruce. It is not dramatic, it is correct. The first data pings arrive like postcards, a looping cluster around the bend, dawn and dusk, foraging excursions that draw ellipses through willow flats and back. A wide detour on the evening the drone team got there fine, as if a bad memory had a shape. Once, a long night movement upstream during a wind event, then a precise return to the sandbar when calm restored the river's usual grammar. Site fidelity isn't superstition in the graph, it's a pattern you can hold in your hand. Emma learns to read the map without needing to be in the picture. She builds a small, careful field guide for the community center, Give Them Room, moose at river mouths, with diagrams of safe distances, a primer on crepuscular habits, and a page on hydraulic shelter. illustrated with arrows instead of adjectives. She gives a talk where the loudest part is what she doesn't say. No coordinates, no heroics, no promises of sightings. If you love a thing, she says, let it keep its choices. The river teaches her breathing too. She times her inhales to the soft clap of ice plates that still drift in the shade, her exhales to the hiss across gravel. Sleep thickens. The tremor in her hands retires to a smaller room. She starts shooting again, not for proof, but for texture. Hoar frost on willow bark. The slow curtain of vapor from a moose's nostrils in cold air, the tiny muscle at the base of an ear, deciding which sound matters. Grief does not vanish. It acquires edges she can walk around. One evening, clouds loan the valley a pink that makes everything tender. Emma watches the collar's dot settle within 5 meters of the sandbar's seam and doesn't move to meet it. Through glass and distance, the cow lifts her head and checks the world the way she always does: wind, river, space. The pause lands where the net once bit the bank. The ledger acquires one more line, then another. Pattern, not pledge. Memory, not myth. Enough. By autumn, the collar's breadcrumb trail has become something like a lullaby, looping ellipses through willow flats, long pauses at dawn and dusk on the same 5 meters of sandbar. The link programmed to release at 6 months is due any day. Wind sharpens, tamaracks go to gold. Emma checks the map each evening and lets the small dot teach her patience. Then, 3 nights before the collar's scheduled drop, a storm shoulders down from the Rockies, sleet first, then a heavy rain that swells the river and scrubs the banks. The dot goes quiet, not gone, but erratic, throwing positions that don't agree with themselves. Garcia texts, might be water interference, we'll watch it. At dusk the next day, a steady ping returns on the bend of course, hovering in that familiar seam like a heartbeat. The release finally happens at 17:39 on a Wednesday that smells like wet leaves. The software logs it, collar drop flagged, last movement recorded at the sandbar. As soon as the unit is off, the dot becomes trash unless someone recovers it. The team's job is to keep the river from wearing a necklace it didn't ask for. They plan the retrieval like they plan everything, as if the animal were already there and mattered more than the object. No spectators, no shortcuts. The river is still high and sullen from the storm, so they choose the upstream approach, quiet, deliberate, with one person on the bank and one wading only where the current writes permission. Emma takes the long lens from the bluff, documenting the human part of the map without stepping onto it. The collar lies where the sandbar kisses the current, half buried in reed litter, reflective band dulled to the color of wet stone. It would be easy to rush and make a noise the river would remember for the wrong reasons. Instead, Lavoie waits out a gust, then closes the last meters in 3 slow steps, lifting the unit free with a gloved hand. He checks the drop hinge, nods to the vet who inspects the wear. No hair caught, no edges sharp. The device goes into a dry bag. The sandbar goes back to being a sandbar. Textbook, Garcia says softly, which is as close as this work gets to celebration. They leave before the hour that belongs to her. Emma stays, well back, glass steady, breath held without meaning to. The bend gathers light into a warm bruise. The cow steps out of spruce with the carefulness of a thing that has earned it. She is collarless now, the throat clean where a faint line of pale skin once sat. Ears forward, then easy. She lowers her muzzle to drink. When she lifts her head, a drop clings to the place where metal used to be and falls like a tiny, ordinary confession. For a count of 10, maybe 12, she stands exactly where the net had once bitten the bank, exactly where the collar chose to let go, exactly where the current, months ago, learned the shape of a body that could bend it. It is not a vigil. It is a check, the way creatures confirm that the world is still arranged according to what kept them alive yesterday. A willow twig snaps somewhere upstream, She turns her head along the river's line, not away from Emma, but not toward her either. Choice, measured and kept. Emma could press the shutter and make proof. She doesn't. She lets the moment live outside the camera, outside the label. The moose steps back into the trees, her passage wicking into shadow until nothing remains but the impression a large thing has left in the air. On the trail out, Garcia's boot scuffs a print where a hind hoof has overlapped an old human oval, perfect as a diagram. He gestures but doesn't name it. The river does its old work beside them, unastonished. The job is finished, the collar recovered, the data intact, the animal unharnessed to her own map. The right thing has been returned to the right place, the sandbar to the moose, the story to the river, the distance to everyone who needs it. Emma pauses at the bluff and looks down at the bend. The light is going, a last amber running along the water like a hand. She thinks of Ben, of the ferry angle, of the seam that once held her, and feels not rescue, but permission to leave the river as she found it and to carry only what memory allows. Winter takes the valley in slow breaths again, laying a pale hand over willow and bar. The bend forgets the storm's brown, returns to steel and glass. Emma stacks wood, oils the stove hinge, and boxes the field notes that kept her company through the thaw. The community guide, Give Them Room, hangs in the rec center by the door, where kids leave wet boots. Her photos from this year are mostly textures and distances, hoarfrost stitching a twig, steam huffing from a broad muzzle at dawn, the faint chevron a hoof leaves on silt. Proof of presence without theft. On the last evening before she drives south, she takes the porch chair that knows her shoulders and carries it to the bluff. The river wears sunset like an old shawl. A crow writes a single line across it. Spruce keep the rest of the sentence. She does not plan a goodbye. Goodbyes pretend at ownership. She plans a look. It comes the way weather does, quietly inevitable. From the black seam of spruce, the cow steps out to the sandbar with the care of a thing that remembers ice. Collarless throat, faint healed line, the small white teardrop that made a map out of a face. She drinks, then lifts her head and considers the open. Not toward Emma, not away. Just a slow sweep that gathers wind and silence and the way banks hold. For a handful of heartbeats they share the old, honest distance. No whistle, no wave. Emma keeps her hands still on her knees. The moose turns, places a hind hoof exactly into an earlier print, and disappears the way large things do when they've been allowed to keep their options. First shoulders, then hips, then no more. Emma stands. She takes one last slow scan of the bend. Cones gone, flagging down, sand clean of human clutter, and feels the click of a rightness settling. It wasn't gratitude that brought the cow to the river the day the ice broke. It was the body solving a problem the river posed the same way it will tomorrow and next spring and the spring after that. Still, there is a truth that lives beside the data. Sometimes the place you made safe remembers you long enough to steady your breath when you need it. Back inside, the stove ticks, tiny metronome. Emma lays a single print on the mantle. River at dusk, nothing centered. A wash of amber along a seam where water keeps breathing under ice. She flips the light off and lets the room be warmed by what's returned to where it belongs. Freedom, not a favor. Distance, not a door closed. Stories want endings, rivers prefer continuance. The bend will go on, making its quiet case for memory. Willow flush, thaw seam, hoof prints stitched like careful handwriting after storms. Site fidelity is not myth. It is a pattern that lets wild bodies spend less and live more. What we call thanks often looks in the field like a pause at the right meter mark, a check of wind, a choice to keep distance. If this story worked, it's because everyone who mattered let the right space open. Officers who set perimeters and wrote dull, necessary citations, a vet who trusted low doses and clear angles, neighbors who learned to watch without entering the frame, a photographer who traded proof for room, no miracles, only method, and the quiet, stubborn hope that method, repeated, becomes culture. Do not approach or attempt to feed, follow, or photograph moose at close range. In ice or water emergencies, call your local conservation or emergency services and keep people, and dogs, back. Support the units that do the calm work. Donate to licensed wildlife rehab centers, attend community briefings, share guides that teach distance over drama. Protect the small places memory uses, the 5 meters where danger once became relief, the willow flats that make winter survivable, the dusk hours that belong to crepuscular lives. Let wild maps stay wild. This is Paw Prints and Stories. Stay gentle, the wild remembers,